Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Please subscribe and like if you didn't do it before. And in this episode, let's talk about wrestling between a man and a woman, about possibilities and differences. So, wrestling between men and women is a complex and controversial topic that raises numerous ethical, safety, and societal considerations. The idea of men and women compete against each other in wrestling or any sport has been met with both intrigue and criticism. In this video, let's explore the various aspects of mixed gender wrestling and discuss the challenges and controversies associated with it. Traditionally, wrestling has been a segregated sport with separate competitions and weight classes for men and women. This separation was primarily due to concerns about physical differences, safety, and societal norms. However, in recent years, there has been a growing interest in allowing a mixed gender wrestling in some contexts, driven by a desire for greater gender equality in sports. One of the main concerns with mixed gender wrestling is the physical differences between men and women. On average, men tend to have greater muscle mass and physical strength, which can create an imbalance in competition. This imbalance can lead to safety issues, with the potential to injury for the female wrestlers. Safety is a paramount concern in sports, and mixing genders can increase the risk of injuries. Wrestling involves grappling, throwing, and pinning, all of which can be physically intense. Men may unintentionally overpower women due to their physical advantages, leading to potential injuries. Fairness. Fair competition is essential in sports. When men and women compete against each other, it can be challenging to ensure a level playing field. Weight classes and other measures are put in place to mitigate these concerns, but they may not entirely eliminate the disparities in physical strength and size. Mixed gender wrestling can challenge traditional gender roles and norms. It may be met with a resistance from those who believe that sports should remain segregated based on gender. On the other hand, advocates argue that it promotes gender equality and challenges stereotypes. Mixed gender wrestling is not a one-size-fits-all concept. Its appropriateness depends on the specific context and rules in place. So here are a few scenarios where mixed gender wrestling can be considered. Exhibition matches. Some wrestling events may include exhibition matches between men and women for just entertainment purposes. These matches are often choreographed and focused on showcasing the skills and athleticism of the participants rather than determining a winner. In a practice of training setting, mixed gender wrestling can be beneficial for improving skills and techniques. Wrestlers of all genders can learn from each other and develop their abilities. Youth wrestling. In youth wrestling, where physical differences are less pronounced, mixed gender matches may be more feasible and are sometimes encouraged to promote inclusion and skill development. The concept of men and women wrestling each other has been around for centuries, but it's essential to distinguish between various forms of wrestling and the modern organized sport of amateur and professional wrestling. Throughout history, various cultures have had forms of wrestling that included both men and women. These forms of wrestling often had cultural, ritualistic, or ceremonial significance. However, these were typically not the competitive sports we think of today. In terms of modern organized amateur and professional wrestling, men and women have participated in separate competitions for much of its history. Wrestling became a regulated sport in the 19th century with separate events and weight classes for men and women. Women wrestling began to gain more recognition in the 20th century, with female athletes participating in various wrestling disciplines such as freestyle and later Greco-Roman. However, it wasn't until the late half of the 20th century that women's wrestling started to gain broad acceptance and inclusion in international wrestling competitions. One notable milestone was the inclusion of women wrestling in the Olympics. Women's freestyle wrestling was first introduced as an Olympic sport in the 2004 Athens Olympics, marking a significant step in the recognition and growth of women's wrestling on the world stage. So while men and women may have engaged in informal or traditional wrestling practices throughout history, the organized and regulated form of men's and women's wrestling we know today, with separate competition and weight classes, has its roots in the 19th and 20th centuries. So wrestling between men and women has existed informally and sporadically in various cultures throughout history. However, it's important to note that such encounters were often not regulated sports events, but rather situational or entertainment-based occurrences. Historical accounts of men and women wrestling each other can be found in different forms, including folklore, myths, and cultural practices. These instances were typically not organized or structured competition as we understand them today. The concept of men and women wrestling in organized competitive sports events with rules and weight classes is a relatively recent development. In modern sports, with proper regulations and a focus on fairness and safety, it wasn't until the later half of the 20th century that mixed-gender wrestling became a more recognized and regulated practice, primarily in forms of entertainment wrestling and in specific non-traditional wrestling organizations. Even then, it is often considered a niche or special attraction within the broader world of wrestling. The first organized wrestling competitions between men and women likely occurred in various regions and at different times, and it can be challenging to pinpoint a specific location or date for the first instance of such matches due to limited historical records. As mentioned earlier, mixed-gender wrestling was not a common or regulated practice in the early history of wrestling. In the modern era, the concept of men and women wrestling each other has been more prominent in the world of entertainment wrestling, such as professional wrestling. While these matches are often scripted for entertainment purposes rather than competitive sports, they have been featured in wrestling promotions in various countries. For example, in the world of professional wrestling, mixed-gender matches have been a part of promotions like World Wrestling Entertainment in the United States. These matches are typically for entertainment and scripted storylines rather than genuine athletic competitions. It's important to note that in the context of organized and regulated amateur wrestling, men and women have traditionally competed separately due to concerns about physical differences, safety, and fairness. The inclusion of women in organized competitive amateur wrestling events took time to gain acceptance and was regulated separately from men's wrestling for most of its history. So while there have been instances of mixed-gender wrestling in the world of entertainment wrestling, it is relatively recent and often falls under the category of scripted performances rather than genuine athletic competitions. In organized and regulated amateur wrestling, where men and women compete separately in weight classes, it is generally less common for women to defeat men in matches due to psychological differences, including differences in muscle mass and strength. The sport is structured this way to ensure fairness and safety in competition. However, there have been instances where highly skilled and accomplished female wrestlers have competed and even won against male counterparts. These instances are relatively rare and often occur when a female wrestler has exceptional technical skill, experience, and conditioning that allow her to overcome some of the physical differences. It's important to note that wrestling competitions are not solely about strength, but also about technique, strategy, and agility. Women who compete against men often rely on their technical expertise and conditioning to level the playing field to some extent. Even in these cases, it's essential to recognize that wrestling between men and women is not typical in regulated amateur wrestling events. In the world of entertainment wrestling, where scripted storylines and performances are common, mixed-gender matches may feature women defeating men as part of the storytelling and entertainment aspect of the sport. However, these outcomes are predetermined and do not reflect actual athletic competition. The level of embarrassment or discomfort that a man may feel when wrestling a woman can vary greatly from person to person and is influenced by cultural, social, and personal factors. It's important to recognize that wrestling, like any sport, should prioritize mutual respect, consent, and a focus on the competition itself rather than gender-based stereotypes or discomfort. In some cultures or social contexts, there may be strong traditional beliefs or stereotypes about gender roles and physical strength. This can lead to discomfort or embarrassment for some men when wrestling women, as they may fear being judged by others. Individuals have different comfort levels when it comes to physical contact and competition with members of other opposite gender. Some men may feel perfectly fine wrestling women and see it as a normal part of their sport, while others may feel uncomfortable due to personal boundaries or beliefs. Wrestlers, regardless of gender, are often focused on their competitive goals and the technical aspects of the sport. For some athletes, the desire to win and perform at their best may outweigh any potential discomfort associated with wrestling someone of the opposite gender. The training environment and the attitudes of coaches and teammates can also play a significant role. A supportive and inclusive training environment that emphasizes respect and equality can help reduce discomfort and embarrassment. It's essential to prioritize respect and consent in any wrestling situation. Both participants should feel comfortable and willingly agree to the match. If either party is uncomfortable or unwilling, the match should not take place. As societal norms evolve, there is a growing recognition of gender equality in sports, including wrestling. This shift in perspective can help reduce the stigma or embarrassment associated with men wrestling women, as it becomes more accepted and normalized. Aggressiveness in wrestling is a trait that varies among individuals and is influenced by factors such as training, experience, coaching, and personal disposition rather than gender. So it's not accurate to make a broad generalization that women are inherently more aggressive when wrestling men. Wrestling, like any combat sport, requires a certain level of controlled aggression to be competitive. Wrestlers of all genders are trained to be assertive, to seize opportunities, and to maintain a strong offensive and defensive mindset during matches. This aggression is an essential aspect of the sport and is not a gender specific. However, it's important to emphasize that the level of aggression and competitiveness can vary among individuals and it's not solely determined by gender. Some female wrestlers may have an extremely aggressive and competitive style, while others may employ a more technical or defensive approach. And the same variability exists among male wrestlers. In the context of regulated amateur wrestling, men and women compete within their respective weight classes and follow the same rule and techniques. The sport prioritizes fairness, safety, and sportsmanship, and aggression is directed forward toward scoring points and achieving a victory within these parameters. In professional wrestling or scripted entertainment wrestling, the level of aggression displayed by wrestlers of all genders is often exaggerated for entertainment value, and the outcomes are predetermined as part of the storyline. So, what do you personally feel about male and female wrestling? You can write your opinion in the comment section down below. Okay, see you next time. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and if you can, share this video in your social media.